And welcome to our April Inside the Author Studio interview. I am so excited about our guest tonight. She is the #1 emergent management thinker as selected by Thinkers50 in all of the world. My goodness, that's impressive. And her credentials don't stop there. You may have seen her articles in Forbes or in Psychology Today, and you may already have a copy of her excellent book, The Success Factor. And what do astronauts and Olympians and Nobel Prize winners have in common? Well, Ruth has interviewed all of them for this book, where she distills their best practices into what are the contributing factors to success in our career, in our relationships, in sports, and in writing. And she'll be sharing them tonight. To give you a preview of this book, here's what Dan Pink has to say. And of all the authors I know, Dan Pink is one of my top 5. He is the real deal. He is a social scientist who accesses the latest research and studies, so he has the respect of people in the industry, and he is very accessible and available to the mainstream who understand the concepts that he's talking about because of his real life stories and because of his humanity. He's a fabulous man. And here's what Dan has to say about Ruth's book. Distilling years of research into the world's most successful thinkers and doers in this engaging book, Ruth Gotian offers concise and actionable ways to map their habits into your life. If you would like to map the success habits of some of the top performers in the world today, you're about to do just that. Please welcome our guest tonight, Dr. Ruth Gotian.
Hey, Sam. So exciting to be here with you.
Well, and you were just telling me beforehand that you've had some exciting things happen. Let's see, is that your book was just displayed at the London Book Fair, and a two-time NBA champion was talking about your book on sports television, and an Olympian did a little video about your book by the river where he rode and got, all kinds of exciting things. So we're going to ask our normal questions, but let's just jump to the chase. Since your book came out, how long ago?
2.5 months ago. Not that long ago. I'm just catching up on sleep.
Okay, so what are a couple of favorite things that have happened in these last 2.5 months?
It has been a whirlwind, an absolute whirlwind. And it started with a week of book launch events. And there were many. Everything from my alma mater, Columbia University, actually brought back my dissertation committee in order to have a book talk. And anyone who's ever been in front of a dissertation committee, that is the most nerve-wracking, terrifying thing. The fact that I agreed to do it for a second time, I still can't believe it, but they agreed they're not taking my degree away. It was great, but that was fun. It was fun to see them again. And one of my favorite book launch events was the one that you actually moderated. And it is the only time, it was set up for a bar joke. It was all the people who are in the book and who endorsed the book were invited. Now I know all of them, but they don't know each other. So this was the Nobel Prize winners and the astronauts and the Olympic champions all together on one Zoom. So that was a lot of fun. And yeah, Zaza Pachulia, the 2-time NBA champion, talked about my book on NBC Sports and waved it, for everyone to see. And it was a good long segment. That was beyond my wildest dreams. And you see who your loyal friends are and your loyal supporters are, because these are the people who are really going above and beyond to help support you in ways you didn't even know that you needed. And I clearly had an entire village to help me. People just kept coming out of the woodworks, and I'm so thankful. Could not have done this without them.
Well, that will be one of our questions tonight, is that, how did you get access to these people and convince them to do the interviews? Because many of our authors are doing interviews for their book, and they would love to know your system. And I know you've got one. So we'll get to that in a moment. However, let's go back to the beginning. And something prompted you to actually put those fingers to those keys and to start getting all of these stories and insights and your work out of your head and into the world. So put us in the scene where you decided to write this book.
So this was actually a long time coming. My doctoral research was on success. I've been obsessed with success for a very long time. And at the time I studied physician scientists, those who have the MD and also do research. And after I finished my research and I got my degree, by the way, I was 43 when I went back to school to start my doctorate. So for those of you who are working and doing all this, I feel the pain. I know what it's like. One of the people I spoke with afterward, and I was telling him about my research and the results, it was the former Surgeon General of the United States, Dr. David Satcher. He was during the Clinton administration. He was the Surgeon General. And he said, you have to write a book about this. Now, he was a former Surgeon General. He was the head of the CDC. He was a university president. So I listened to him, but in my mind, I'm thinking, who the hell wants to read this, right? I'm fascinated, but I can geek out on this. I'm not sure anyone else can. And then 2 years ago, I got that call that no child wants to get, which is daddy's in the hospital, come quick. So I boarded a plane. I just published a textbook. I grabbed it and I actually gave it to my father at the hospital. Now, as I was sitting for weeks at his bedside, and remember, the first COVID patients are coming in at this point, and he sees me working on the computer for hours and hours and hours. And he said to me, are you getting ideas for your next book? And I said, no, I'm not thinking about my next book. I'm thinking how I can keep you alive and who I need to talk to. Well, he passed away in August 2020. And a week after I finished Sitting Shiva, an editor from a publishing company reached out to me. Unbeknownst to me, has been following my work, which I had been publishing in other papers, and talked to me about writing a book. And I knew that was my father's nudge to do this. And the book was published on the 17-month anniversary of his funeral. Wow. So I believe that it was the former Surgeon General of the United States that planted the idea in my head, but I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to publish it yet, but it was my father's gentle nudge years later that got me to publish it. And that's why it's dedicated to his memory.
Well, I can only imagine how honored he is. He's somewhere aware of this, correct? And how honored he is that you have done a body of work and contributed it to the world that is already making a difference for people around the world and that will continue to do so. It's you are carrying on his legacy.
I hope so.
Yeah,
I definitely hope so.
Well, Ruth, that was Kogan Page that reached out to you. And one of the questions that comes up a lot in our interviews is there are a lot of choices these days about publishing paths. We can self-publish, we can go with a traditional New York publisher, we can go kind of with a hybrid. So I know that Kogan Page had reached out to you, that editor had been following you. So you may have already felt a partnership with that person, that this person will be a champion for my work. I'm not trying to prove myself to them. They already believe in me. However, did you explore other publishing options, or was it Kogan Page from the get-go?
It was pretty much Kogan Page from the get-go, but I did do my due diligence. I knew I needed a publisher because I work full-time. I have a family. I just did not have the bandwidth to do all the things you need to do if you self-publish, to find the right people and do all that. And remember, I was in mourning. So the little bandwidth I had to be able to focus on writing, not how do I do the million other things you need to do if you self-publish. And I loved my editor, Kathy Sweeney. And two other friends of mine, coincidentally, had contracts also with Kogan Page and were working with the same editor. So I reached out to them before I ever signed on to ask about their experiences and what it was like. And that convinced me that this was the way to go. And I think I know people who have done different forms. For me, this was absolutely the right decision because of all the other things I have going on in my life. I knew I needed to outsource some things, and going with a traditional publisher was the right choice for me.
Mm-hmm. And now you had mentioned bandwidth. And as you said, you've got a lot going on. You're still grieving and mourning. You've got a family to take care of. You got a full-time job to take care of. And so with that bandwidth that you had, did you have some type of writing system? How did you make the most of those few hours so that you could get your manuscript turned in on time?
So I'm really good with deadlines. I need deadlines. I need the structure that it offers. And one of my mentors said, sometimes we need those constraints, and some people work better under stress. Not so much stress that you freeze, but enough stress that it keeps you moving. Mm-hmm. So my editor and I worked out a timeline where essentially every 3 weeks I had to churn out another chapter, with each chapter being about 5,000 words. Now, I have an hour and a half commute each way to work.
Wow.
And my work it's not manual, it's very cognitive, which means at the end of the day, there's nothing left in my brain. So I also know that I write best in the mornings. I am sharpest in the morning. I'm an early riser. I have my shower and my coffee, and I'm good to go. And I could just write for hours. So this book was written on the weekends, in the mornings. And it took me about 2 weekends to write a chapter. And then I would let it marinate, and then I would review it again and make changes and edit it on that third weekend. But I would think about during the week about what I wrote that weekend, and then make a note, add something, add the story, take this out, it doesn't really work, etc. And during that time, I was also getting feedback from my editor on the chapters that I submitted. Mm-hmm. So I would review what she wrote overall, but I didn't actually start making the changes. I saved those changes until the very end, but if there was something more thematic about it that I had to continue throughout the other chapters, that I would incorporate right away.
You know, Ruth, this is a wonderful blend. One of the things we've talked about is that if you reread what you've written, you'll rewrite what you've written. And then at the end of the month, you'll have the same 10 pages, and they won't necessarily be better. They'll just be different.
That's right.
And so it sounds like there was this lovely combination where it's a chapter every 3 weeks. You think about it during the week, and you write it, you think about it some more, and then you kind of edit it, and then you polish it the third week, but you're compartmentalizing the book. So instead of being overwhelmed at having to write a 200-page book, you're working on getting 5,000 words good, right? And then 5,000 words, and then 5,000 words, which must have made this seem achievable as opposed to overwhelming to you.
Sam, I broke it down even smaller than that.
Wow.
So the chapter was 5,000 words, which meant 2,500 words, or 1,250 words per weekend day for 2 weekends. Wow. And I'd want to write a certain number of words before I took a break. So I would write 500-600 words, take a little break, and then write the other 500-600 words. 500-600 words is nothing. My Forbes articles are 500-700 words. So that became no problem. And what I very quickly realized was that stories take up a lot of words. So I was trying to incorporate adult learning lessons in a passive aggressive way, right? Because this is not here to be a textbook, but I wanted to do it in a gentle way where people are learning something without even realizing that I'm trying to teach them something. And then I incorporate the story of NBA champion Steve Kerr, or Dr. Tony Fauci, who's leading our COVID efforts, or Scott Hamilton, the Olympic champion figure skater. And when I can weave in these stories to underscore a message that I'm trying to make, that first of all, it brings it to life. Second of all, that's a lot of words. for people who are authors, that's a lot of words.
Yeah. You know, it's just one of the things that people at Maui Writers Conference agreed upon was it doesn't matter what process you have, as long as you have a process.
That's correct.
A system that works for you. And you obviously created a very clear system that worked for you. Now, I can imagine people are curious. So did you do all of your interviews in advance and then have the collection and then integrate it in, or did you do them simultaneously?
So this has been going on for years. Some of it is actually from my doctoral work. So I had to get permission to unmask their names because anyone who's ever done social science or anything with what we call human subjects, you cannot use their real names. Yeah. So I had to request to be able to use their stories and unmask their names. Most of them said yes. And then I was continuing to do interviews over the years. I did not use all of the interviews. You always want to interview more than you're actually going to use. Not that any of the interviews were bad. They still supported my message, but I gave the story of 4 astronauts. Did I really need 10 astronaut stories? Probably not. But I didn't know which ones I was going to use. At one point, they said, you have too many scientists from Texas. So I had to take some out. I know. I said, it's a big state. No. So that's why I had the interviews, and I was writing and interviewing also at the same time. And then when I went back to the edits, I would add some of the stories in that I felt were omitted. I was also looking for different kinds of balances, right? I didn't want a chapter that only had male people, featured, or only Olympians, or only astronauts, or only Nobel Prize winners. So I had to later make sure that I had some sort of balance, but that's what went on at the end.
You know, now what you're talking about is organization. James Rollins was one of our favorite keynote speakers. He went from being a veterinarian in Davis to getting a 2-book deal, and now he's got like 27 New York Times bestsellers. What he said, though, that writing the book is like, for him, flows. It's the research that he both loves it and becomes overwhelming and daunting. So now, did you storyboard things on your wall? Did you have files for different topics or different interviews? How did you organize this incredible collection of content?
Google and Excel are my friends. I knew how many astronauts I had, how many Olympians I had, how many Nobel Prize winners I had, how many politicians I had. I had all of that. And I also wrote who I featured in each chapter, because what happens is by the time you get to chapter 8, you forget who you wrote about in chapter 2. Mm-hmm. Now, I obviously had a table of contents, so I knew the overall topics that were going to be described in each chapter. Mm-hmm. But sometimes the stories didn't come out until I was actually writing it. And for somebody who's very type A and super organized, to let it flow that way does not come naturally. But I had to learn how to do that. And I will say that it's the same process I used back in the day when I got my doctorate, both with the writing of chunking it, mm-hmm. and interview code, write, interview code, write, interview code, write. Because if you wait to do the interviews and then wait to do all the coding and then wait to do all the writing, you never finish. Yeah. You need some instant gratification to keep your motivation going. And that's what worked for me. So I definitely had a lot of Excel, a lot of backing up, a lot of Google Drive. That's what worked. And when I realized I was missing something, I went searching for it.
I really love the left and right brain that's going on here. The left brain, which is the organization system, the process, the very clear delivery timelines, et cetera. And then the right brain, this intuitive, like, okay, I can't have three astronauts in the same chapter and can't have three men in the same chapter, et cetera. Now, we get to shift into something that is very right brain, is that going into it, you had certain premises and you had certain conclusions from your research. However, there were things that surprised you in the book and in the interviews, in particular, where awardees keep their medals. So tell us about that, please, Ruth.
Yes. So I have the good fortune of interviewing people who get a lot of awards and a lot of medals. And with the Olympians in particular, because I'm an Olympics junkie, I would always ask them at the end, can you show me your medal? And that's when fumbling started to happen. And that really took me by surprise, because one had it in a box under her bed, one had to run to the safe, one had it in the nightstand drawer, and Apollo Anton Ono had it in a brown paper bag in his sock drawer. Only two of them had it on display. And I thought this was so odd. And I pushed back on it, because I said, if I got an Olympic medal, I'd be wearing it around to the grocery store, to vacuum. I don't understand why it's in a brown paper bag in the sock drawer. And they very clearly told me it was never about the medal. It was about the journey. The medal is not something, when they started out, that they ever thought it wasn't even on their radar. It wasn't about that. And it's true, because they would, if it was all about the medal, they would have quit after they received it. Now, Dr. Bob Lefkowitz, who is one of the Nobel Prize winners, he got the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2012. I was just emailing him on Monday or Tuesday. He's still working. He's still bringing in students into his laboratory. He's 79 years old. No sign of slowing down. This is what he was put on this earth to do. It was never about the medal. And that's why they don't have it on display. In fact, Scott Hamilton, the Olympic champion figure skater, the one who does the backflips, he gave all of his medals away.
Wow.
He said it was just too suffocating.
Wow. Suffocating.
So,
what a word.
That's what he said. Yeah.
It's really interesting, because I know that surprised you, especially the fact that that was not an isolated case, that was actually the norm. And your book is called The Success Factor. However, there's many success factors. So would you select one of your favorites that might be particularly applicable to writers and authors?
So, right, there's 4 success factors that they all do. One of them is their work ethic. And I don't mean that they work 18-hour days. In fact, they value their rest as much as they value their work. And that took them a while to figure out. But once they did, they really, they stick to that. Their vacation time, their private time, their personal time is their time. To me, part of that was the way they approached challenges, which I think is an important lesson for writers and for people in any industry. When they were faced with a challenge, they never once questioned if they should give up. They never once questioned, is this for me? They never once questioned, can I overcome this? They knew that they could overcome the challenge. So instead, they focused on how to overcome the challenge. What is the strategy I haven't thought of yet? Their entire focus shifted from if to how. And once you start doing that, I have writer's block. Will I overcome the writer's block? Of course I'll overcome it. What do I need to do in order to overcome the writer's block? It's all about the strategy to overcome. And they weren't, as a result, afraid to try things. So some people are afraid of success and some people are afraid of failure. And that's why they never start. the high achievers who I interviewed, they didn't have a problem with success. And they certainly didn't have a problem with failure. They actually expected it. They actually fear not trying more than they fear failing. And to me, that was illuminating because, and that has been really my motto ever since I kept seeing that pattern, is what is the worst that will happen?
Mm-hmm.
As long as nobody dies, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
What is the worst that will happen?
Mm-hmm.
And when I realized the worst that would happen is really not that bad, I realized that you have to at least try. And if there's something that you want, you have to ask for it. Because before you turn yourself down by not even bringing it up, you have to give the other person the opportunity to say yes. And that changes everything.
Well, there's some pearls of wisdom. In fact, for every one of our interviewees for Inside the Author Studio, Kendra Ray picks out, keeps listening for a quote that pops out. And then she makes a lovely quote image that she gifts you with and that we put up on our Facebook page so that visitors now and in the future can glean from your wisdom. So I think shift from if to when is one of them already, right, Kendra? So
yeah, I have a page
if to how.
yeah, if excuse me, if to how, correct. Thank you. And now just a couple more questions for me, because I know that people would like to ask questions. Ruth, you are a walking, talking example of an authorpreneur. You have been very proactive about taking responsibility for staying visible and sharing your success stories and the good news that happens so that you stay top of mind. So it's not like book launch, bye-bye. No, it's something where you have really created a lot of buzz where people continue to be brand ambassadors for your book. So of all of your marketing that you've done, what are two of the activities that have really gotten the best results for you?
Well, first I will tell you, it is the hardest thing I've done because I'm an academic and academics, we're not supposed to promote ourselves. Our work is supposed to promote us.
Mm-hmm.
But I quickly realized that's nonsense because if nobody hears about my work, then how am I going to have the impact that I'm hoping my work will have?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not me, it's the work that I'm promoting.
Mm-hmm.
And once I had that shift in my mind, it became a hell of a lot easier. So the question was, what did I do to stay top of mind?
Two of your best marketing practices that really got results for you: sales, visibility, speaking engagements, media interviews.
So my father said, you don't ask, you don't get. So I asked everybody. I mean, everybody. So if anyone I knew wrote for any periodical, I asked them if they could cover my book. Mm-hmm. So it has been covered in over a dozen places. Wow. Maybe more. Forbes, Psychology Today, Smart Brief. Recently, the Riverdale Press did a whole profile. That was one. Zaza Pachulia, who is in the book, he's the one who talked about the book on NBC Sports. I was talking to him about it. He's become a good friend. And I said, I want to honor the Golden State Warriors legacy and make sure I'm doing things that are aligned with their brand. Can you please put me in touch with the head of PR for the NBA team, for the Golden State Warriors, so I can make sure that what I'm doing is kosher and aligned with their brand? And before I knew it, the Golden State Warriors are now helping to publicize the book because their head coach, Steve Kerr, is featured in it, and Zaza is featured in it, and the team are featured in it. And then anyone I knew who had a podcast, who had a popular LinkedIn Live, I reached out to them. And I figured they'll either ignore me or they'll say yes. And most of them had said yes. And I know you asked for two, but there's more.
Oh, yeah, there's. Well, how about I'm going to ask one more question, and then please put your comments or questions in chat, and then we'll open it up, and we can't wait to hear what you would like to ask of Ruth or comment about her work. So one last one for me is that you are one of the leading social scientists now on success factors, with your body of work on accumulation of insights over years. So now, having published this work, having had an opportunity to meet all of these respected thought leaders and influencers and high performers, if you had one piece of advice to give writers about how they could create a successful book and have a successful career as an author, what might that be?
Create a team, create a tribe of people who believe in your work and want to support you, either with a conversation when you have writer's block to get you unstuck, or to help promote the book, or to help you brainstorm ways to market the book, because you cannot do it all by yourself. Because not just because you don't have the bandwidth, you also don't have perspective. And you don't have all the ideas. And there are other people who have a lot of incredible ideas that you could actually learn from. And opening yourself up and hearing from other people is the best thing that you can do. I was knee deep in writing the book when Sam came on to this group that we're a part of, and she gave us a webinar, and I took pages and pages and pages of notes, and I was already in the writing process, but I know that it shifted some of the things that I've done. And I would always go back to those notes. Think it and ink it is one of my favorite quotes now.
Yeah, the group has heard that quite a few times.
Yes. So definitely create that tribe.
Wonderful. Well, that's actually hopefully one of the benefits of this community, is just as you said, is that how can we deliberately and intentionally align with people who have our front and back, so that we can leverage the rising tide brain trust, right, of this
That's
group.
right.
So speaking of this group, all right, it's your time. So let's see who's gonna, Kendra, I know you've been watching comments in chat and so forth. So who will start us off, please, with your question or comment?
Yeah, we're gonna start off with David.
Okay,
You just
David,
wanna unmute yourself.
welcome.
Here we go. Certainly not a Zoom expert, as you can tell. I think it's pretty clear that having ideas is great, but if you don't have the tools to make it a reality, it just stays private. So I had put into the chat, she had mentioned that Excel was one of her friends, and that brought to mind what softwares did she use to actually compile the research and then actually write the book.
Wonderful. Thank you, David.
So the interviews were done in different formats. Some of them were done pre-pandemic, in person when I could do that. It was, this was way before Zoom, some of them. So there was a phone with an attachment in order to record the conversation. And it records it digitally, but you have to get permission from the other person and tell them that you're recording it. Then once we had Zoom, that was no problem. And then it gets transcribed, and then you can choose, you could do otter.ai, you could do rev.com, you can outsource it, just go to Upwork or something. And then, so I'm a social scientist, so I did the hardcore research. I'm not saying you need to do all this, but then all the interviews were then coded. Coding is something social scientists do. And that was, I used Deduce. So if you go to deduce.com, DEDOOSE. And there you get a frequency analysis, and then you can slice and dice it by different variables, right? Men thought this, women thought that, etc. People from Texas thought this way. And then to write it, I originally thought it should be in one document, and my editor insisted that each chapter be a separate document, which was different from all the advice that I heard. each one separately. And I actually wrote it in Google Drive, in Word. And I attached Grammarly to it, which pay for the premium. It's worth it. I don't agree with everything that they suggest, but I agree with about 90%. And it really helped get a more active voice instead of a passive voice, which I noticed I would fall into quite a bit. So that's pretty much the software. And then I would email from Google. I would email it to my editor. It was really that simple.
Boy, I love the specificity of your process because it's replicable. You know, you're naming names and specific and what worked and what didn't and why. So that was a great question, David, and a great response.
Yeah,
So
thank
who's
you.
next with a comment question, please?
Yeah, next up is Janet.
Okay, Janet, let's hear, please.
We go. Thank you, both of you, for doing this. I'm getting over a cold, so if I'm clicking out of my screen, it's because I have to blow my nose. First of all, I wanted to acknowledge and thank you for it's not just academics who are intimidated by promoting themselves. A lot of us are. So I love what you said about promoting the work, not the person. That just mind shift is really helpful for me. But the question I had is, Sam we were talking about the 4 steps, and the first step was the work ethic, and the challenge from if to how, but I never heard the other 3 steps. Are there 3 other steps?
But there are actually four mindsets
Okay.
that are discussed in the book. The first one is the passion and perseverance. The second one is the work ethic. The third one is a strong foundation, which is constantly being reinforced. What they did early in their career, they did later in their career as well. And the last one is their continuous learning through informal means and mentors.
Continuous what? Of learning.
Learning.
Okay.
Continuous learning.
All right.
Those are the 4 elements of success. You have to do them all together. And the something that I did in my book, which was very important to me, which is how I think I distinguished myself from other leadership type books, was that this was based on research, not anecdotal experience. It's not I interviewed 6 friends and here's what they did. This was actually research where I tried to find a common thread, right? And that's how I noticed that the astronaut is just like the Olympic champion. But the last third of the book is something I'm so proud of, because it actually is about the actionable steps that the reader can take immediately, so that we turn one day I'm going to do this, one day I'm going to do that. We're going to turn one day and make today day one. And that to me was really important, because there's a lot of leadership books out there, a lot of books about success. They tell you what to do. They don't teach you how to do it. And I wanted to teach people how to do it based on adult learning principles, because I know what works for you is not going to work for me. So I knew I needed to create options. And people tell me that that is what resonates the most with them, is these things that they can do immediately. And one of the conversations I had with Sam, she said, include this line in the intro. And I did. And people tell me it's very true, which is, this is not a book you read once and put on your shelf. This is a book you read once and keep on your nightstand and continuously refer back to it. That's a Sam Horn statement that she told me to include. And it's so true. And people are telling me that they're doing it, they're tabbing things out in the book and they're referring back to it, because it takes the theory, it takes the stories, and then teaches people how to implement it in a way that works for them in their life. And that was something that was important for me to include. And it really resonated with readers.
Beautiful. Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to read it. I have to read it now.
Yeah.
Let me know if you like it.
Kudos to you, Ruth, because we can plant that line in our intro. However, it doesn't necessarily mean people will do it unless we write a prescriptive book, which is, as you said, what resonates with people, that that there are, just as you shared, I mean, you showcased it tonight. These are not platitudes. These are not sweeping generalizations or surface ideas or cliches. You know, you get into the weeds and you make it replicable with your specificity. So I think it was just one of many reasons why your book is an evergreen. You know, it will be around for years to come because it is timely and timeless, and it is actionable in a way that anyone reading it is going to immediately think how they can apply it and get real world results. So kudos to you.
Like Tung Fu.
Chucks. Guess you can tell that Ruth and I are co-presidents of each other's fan club here. Okay, we've got time for a couple more questions from our community. Who's next, please?
Next up, we have Ariel. I don't know if it's Ariel or Ariel. You're gonna have to correct me because of...
No worries, Kendra. My best friends say it wrong, so no worries.
Okay, good.
I say Ariel, but don't worry if you.
There you go.
So Ruth, I have so many questions for you, and you said if you don't ask, you don't get. So I'm going to ask for additional time of yours at some point in the future because I love what you've done, what you've written. I'm a mindset coach, and I can't wait to buy your book and refer it to my clients as validation and confirmation of these powerful principles. So thank you for the work that you did, as it will benefit me and my clients. So many questions I could ask. One thing, I have a little bit of an insight for Sam and the community and you. I have my first ever interview this Friday. Very nervous and excited with someone who entered the Air Force. She was 40 and when she entered the Air Force. And so I'm excited about this interview coming up. And I focus on a mindset, finding and facing your fears. So that's a bit of context. I'm curious, as the first interview, two questions. One, what did you find to be perhaps the most illuminating question, the question that drew out the most wisdom from those you were interviewing? And then my second question is, how did you address when you determined that you were not going to include an interview that you did and requested with them knowing your intent for it being in the book?
So I blame it on the editor. I say it was left on the cutting room floor. Which is often the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they brought it to my attention. You have too many scientists from Texas. You have too many astronauts. You have, right? With the interviewing, when you interview people, what's important to realize is you have seconds to establish trust. If you want someone to open up, don't ask them questions about things you can Google about them. That's a waste of your time and their time. You need to establish trust as quickly as possible. So you want to look for something in their background that you can kick off a conversation. And if you can't find it in their background, and if you're meeting them in person, look around the office quickly or look at their Zoom background or something. I've had conversations over blue glasses, over karate trophies in the background, all sorts of strange things. The other thing is you need to record the conversations. And Sam might differ in her opinion here, but you can't scribble down notes frantically when you're interviewing someone. Because you're like, I don't know if you agree or disagree.
I know. I'll put down my notes right now, Ruth.
No, but you're not frantic with notes. There's a difference. You're writing some key points. There's some people they interview and they want to write paragraphs. And you can't do that because then it feels like an inquisition. And if you want people to open up, you want them to tell their story. So I always started the conversation with, I don't want to talk about what I can Google about you. That's the tip of the iceberg. I want to know what it took to get there, what's below the waterline. And that's how I got people like Dr. Tony Fauci to open up. That's how I got astronauts to open up. That's how I got Olympians to open up. It was not your standard Q&A that they've done a million times. This is different. I wanted to hear about the failures that I don't read about more than the successes that I do. And trust me, they wanted to talk about it. But they would never have talked about it if we didn't develop trust within seconds. I mean, literally, you have seconds to develop trust when you first go on the Zoom or walk into the room with them. So something to consider. And you can take notes, just not paragraphs. You can write keywords, but not paragraphs.
I will record.
Oh, you definitely have to record because
Yes.
you won't
Yeah.
remember everything.
Definitely.
Well, congrats to you, Ariel. And what a really lovely question, because you asked the type of evocative question. What is the most illuminating that up-leveled the answer, because it was a best of, right? And I've been around the block for a few times. And Ruth, what you just said was gold. I have never heard anyone say what you just said that is profound. It's about seconds, but then you practice what you teach again. You then say, okay, how do you earn trust in seconds? You say right up front, never ask anything that you can Google about them. And then you tell people that, so they go, oh, good. You are not going to be like the thousands of other interviews who ask me the same doggone questions where I'm on automatic pilot, just waiting to get out of the room. So you just gave us a masterclass in interviewing. Thank you, Ruth. Really honest.
Thank you. And Sam, that's exactly what you do. I have been on 115 podcasts already. I can do them in my sleep. I've answered the same questions over and over and over and over again. The only person who ever asked me about the writing process was you. The only one. And that's why I'm so excited to talk about it, because it is an isolating process to write a book. And no one has ever asked me about that. Everybody wants to know about the glitz and glamour of, you made it to an Amazon bestseller list. You had this NBA star talking about your book on NBC Sports. And I'm happy to talk about that. But no one's ever asked me about my process, or when I wrote, or what did I do when I was stuck. You're the only one who's asked me about that. And that's what makes it so much more exciting. You're not getting the pro forma answers that I already have in my head from doing 115 podcasts and live shows. This is very different.
You know, see, Ruth, okay, in real time, we're having a teaching moment for the two of us and for everyone on the call. Is number one, Naomi Rohde of National Speakers Association used to talk about the privilege of the platform. And what she meant by that is every single time we get up on a stage, whether there's 5 people in the audience, 50, 500, or 5,000, we have a responsibility to add value to them. So this was time well spent. You bring that same work ethic or ethos to your work, whether it's your interviews, and I am not going to waste their time. I am going to pleasantly surprise them with something that makes the most of our time together, that lets them know I value them. I'm going to honor them by doing my homework in advance. You did it with your book. And what you just brought up, I think, is an ethos that we all share in the community. There is a disproportionate amount of attention these days on write a book in a weekend, there are courses on sell truckloads of books, etc. Right? Excuse me. So any author who feels the privilege and the responsibility of writing a quality book that will make an enduring difference for people absolutely wants to know about process, right? Because that's what we can be proud of. That's what we can take responsibility for. And once again, you're, taking back the curtain and taking us in the scenes of your relationship with your editor. And it wasn't really 5,000 words, it was 1,250 words and so forth. It is helping us think and reflect about our own process. Have we come up with something as specific as that? Are we kind of slapdash about it? Well, maybe we're not getting the results we want because we're not figuring out a process as clearly as you. So anyway, Ruth, if you have anything to say to that, I know I went off a little bit on that. So
No, I will say I'm very competitive, like really competitive. And I love a good challenge. So if my goal was to write 1,200 words today.
Mhm.
That was my bottom. That was my floor.
Mm.
That was if I was really tired.
Mm.
I always try to beat it. I don't care if I beat it by 100 words.
Mhm.
I wanted to beat it. So if I got 1,300 words, that means tomorrow I want to get 1,400 words.
Mhm.
And it's just a little competition that I had with myself because, you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic, couldn't have it with anyone else. So, and it worked.
Boy, did it work. So, and we've got to wrap up in about 3 minutes here. So Kendra, was there one more comment or one more person who had a question that we want to give them a chance to get that in before we wrap up?
Yeah, Mason had a question.
Okay, Mason, let's hear, please.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to be respectful of the time. So first, Sam, I'm always amazed at the people you bring on board. They're all spectacular. Today, you outdid yourself. Ruth, this was really something. Kendra, thank you for making this so flawless. Ruth, if this, and I think my timeline is about right, if this was 19, 20 months ago, I'd be telling you, may your father's memory be a blessing. I can tell you with certainty today that your work, your legacy has continues to make his memory a blessing. So thank you for that. Something you said about if you don't ask, you won't get. It's kind of Sam, you know, this is the first page. It's the first joke in my book about the grandmother and the son on the beach. It's an old Jewish joke, by the way. And if you don't ask, you don't get. My book is about chutzpah, by the way.
I know chutzpah.
I was going to say you're probably familiar with the word, but I didn't want to jump to any conclusions.
Yeah.
But I truly enjoyed this. I look forward to reading your book, and to be respectful to everybody else. I'm good. I thank you all.
Thank you. And I have to ask, is that an Agam picture behind you?
It is, yes.
Beautiful. My
Very
favorite.
good.
You know, so let's honor what Mason brought up, because on that book launch interview that you did, your sons were on that. And so how we're going to wrap this up is for you to tell us something that your sons have said to you about what it's like seeing you in your element, what it's like seeing you be interviewed, sharing these best practices, knowing that your work is respected and out in the world. So please tell us about a moment you've had with your sons and their feedback to you about this experience.
Well, they're teenagers.
Yes.
Two in college and one a senior in high school. So the air I breathe usually embarrasses them. But I think this time, by not saying I embarrassed them, I think that's a major accomplishment. And I think they were very eager to get a signed copy of the book. They never post on social media, but on launch day, they all posted on social media about the book. And I don't send them every article, but I send them a few things. And I know each one has something different that's important to them. But when it was on NBC Sports, that was, now I'm the cool mom. Now I'm the cool mom. They showed their friends.
Okay, Ruth, there's the reason for writing a book. If you want to be a cool dad, you want to be a cool mom, you want your kids, even though they may never tell you to your face, but they're telling their friends, and in their heart, they're respecting you and appreciating you and seeing you in the light, and maybe even will follow your footsteps one day. Who knows, eh?
And you know what? They were impressed when the book appeared in their college bookstore.
There you go.
That was a big deal. When I signed them, they took pictures from every angle.
Yeah. Well, what a joy you are, and what a joy this has been. And one of the many things that Kendra does is not only will she share a couple of your profound and pithy quotes with our group and send them to you, she'll put your information up on our community page so that people can go further into your work and find out maybe your latest Forbes article, Psychology Today article, and continue to celebrate you and your very well-deserved success. Please, let's give Dr. Ruth Gotian a round of applause and appreciation.
Thank you, Sam. And thank you all of you for spending your evening with us. I know it's been a long day for everybody, but this can't be done.
It can. So, and until next time, and join us on April 16th, Kian Gohar will be our Inside the Author Studio interview. Kian ran Singularity U for Peter Diamandis, and he ran X Prize. He just came out with a book with Keith Ferrazzi that was featured at South by Southwest. So you can trust Kian to have some wonderful insights about how to work in the new world, and of course, how to write in the new world as well. This is Sam Horn. So glad you joined our Stop Wishing, Start Writing community. And once again, special thanks to Dr. Ruth Gotian for her insights and examples and her stories that have us eager to get back into our own writing process. Mahalo and onward.